Hey everybody, this is Andre here with the Kevin Breeze channel, and in this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021 and the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. To get more information on the pricing and availability of these phones, be sure to check the links in the description. The link for the Note 8 will actually take you right to the phone on Samsung's website, where a lot of the time, they have some great trade-in deals that you might not be able to find anywhere else. That being said, let's get started. So the Moto G Stylus has a 6.8-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 386, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 84.8%. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has a 6.3-inch Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 1440p, a PPI of 521, an aspect ratio of 18.5:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 83.2%. So definitely some pros and cons for each phone here. The Moto G Stylus definitely has a little bit thinner bezels, a much bigger display overall, but the Note 8 has a higher resolution, higher PPI, and it has a Super AMOLED display as opposed to an IPS LCD. So overall, the colors are going to be a lot brighter, the resolution is going to be better. So between these two, of course, the Moto G Stylus is going to have a much larger display, but on the other hand, the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is going to have a higher quality display. Now, taking a look at the front-facing cameras, the Moto G Stylus has a hole punch for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 16 megapixels. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has the camera right here on the bezel. This camera is 8 megapixels. I do like the hole punch camera a lot. These days, there's usually two different types of front-facing cameras that we regularly see. There's either a hole punch camera or a water drop notch. I've never liked the water drop notch, and having the front-facing camera on the bezel itself is, in my opinion, even worse because that means the bezel is just that much thicker. And having a thick bezel these days is definitely not a good thing. It doesn't do a whole lot to make the phone look newer or anything like that. You can definitely tell the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, even though it does have a very high quality display, is an older phone, and its design does not hide its age. Now internally, the Moto G Stylus has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD expansion. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD expansion. Now of these 64, 50 gigabytes of this internal storage is actually usable. So definitely a big difference here. The Moto G Stylus has about double, if not a little bit more, as the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. So storage-wise, you're definitely going to get a better value with the Moto G Stylus. Now overall, both of these phones do have a decent amount of internal storage. I would say 64 gigabytes is a pretty good minimum. So the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is also not bad in that regard, especially considering with either of these phones, you can expand the storage a little bit with a microSD card, which is great. To put this into perspective, entry-level iPhones, the brand new ones actually, do still start at 64 gigabytes of internal storage, and the iPhone is definitely a lot more than these phones. Even the Note 8, which is technically a flagship phone, it has been around for a little while, so it's definitely going to be a lot more inexpensive than a brand new iPhone. But still, storage-wise, these are very similar. I would say if you are doing any type of content creation, something that takes up a lot of storage, or if you have larger apps like games, then a phone like the Moto G Stylus definitely would have an advantage here, because 64 gigabytes, while it's not super small, might not cut it for something like that. Now, the Moto G Stylus does not have wireless charging, but the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 does, which is something to keep in mind. Wireless charging is a nice feature to have, especially if something happens to your phone, especially if something happens to your charging port and you need an alternative way to charge. It's just nice to have another alternative. And usually a flagship phone like the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 will have wireless charging, whereas a non-flagship phone like the Moto G Stylus won't have wireless charging. Now, I do hope this changes in the future. I do hope that more phones that aren't flagship phones or higher end phones start getting wireless charging, because I think it's a nice feature to have. Now, both of these phones have a fingerprint scanner. The Moto G Stylus has a fingerprint scanner right here on the power button, and the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has a fingerprint scanner on the back right here. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the placement of this fingerprint scanner. I think it's a little bit too close to the camera and kind of uncomfortable to reach, but Let's see how it performs and we'll go from there. So we're gonna start with the fingerprint scanner for the Moto G Stylus. Really fast, one more time. All right, there we go. Testing the fingerprint scanner on the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. One more time. There we go. So really, as far as their performance, there's not a whole lot to say about them. They're both really fast, pretty much equal as far as the speed goes. The placement, however, is a pretty big difference in my opinion. I really do like the placement of the fingerprint scanner on the Moto G Stylus. It's right on the power button, and whether you mean to or just do it out of habit, you're probably gonna touch the power button anyway when you're going to unlock your phone. So it's nice to have it right here so it just unlocks in one motion. The only faster way I can think of is maybe if you're doing face unlock and it's just right there pointed at your face. But you can't do that in your pocket, whereas with this you can. So overall, I do think this is the most convenient way to open your phone. On the other hand, I really don't like the fingerprint scanner here. Reason being, it is right here next to the camera, and I don't think that's very good at all. It's really easy to accidentally touch the camera. In fact, I did it during the demonstration. I accidentally touched the flash right here instead of the actual fingerprint scanner itself, and that was when I was looking right at it. So you can imagine if you're trying to open your phone while you're taking it out of your pocket, you could easily just get a fingerprint on the camera, which it's not a huge deal, but it's still pretty bad. I mean, I don't know why they didn't think of that, but luckily in the later versions, they did work out this quirk. I believe the current version of the Galaxy Note is actually on the display itself, which is also really nice. At this point in time, I don't think they really had fingerprint scanners figured out, and this is definitely proof of that. Speaking of face unlock, both of these devices do have face unlock, and an extra thing that the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has that the Moto G Stylus doesn't is an iris scanner. Now, I've personally never used an iris scanner before. I don't think that the later versions of the Samsung Galaxy Note even have it. It's just a special extra little feature that they were kind of playing around with that nobody really uses. But it is nice to have. I'm guessing it's basically just another version of Face Unlock, but it is nice to have multiple options to unlock your phone, which both of these do, so that's great. Now, taking a look at the camera setup of these phones, the Moto G Stylus has a 48 megapixel rear camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has a 12 megapixel rear camera and a 12 megapixel telephoto camera. Now, as far as features go, these are pretty similar. I would say the advantage the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has over the Moto G Stylus is the telephoto camera. The macro camera can do similar things to the telephoto camera as far as close-up pictures. The telephoto camera can take close-up pictures too, but the macro camera is specifically made for them. But at the same time, as the name implies, the telephoto camera can zoom in really far, whereas the macro camera can't do that. So I would say that that is an advantage in favor of the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. On the other hand, the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 doesn't have an ultra-wide camera, and the Moto G Stylus does. Now, part of this is because when the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 was released, they weren't really putting ultra-wide cameras on phones. That was really still in a very beginning stage, so it is to be expected. Just another reminder that the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, while it's a very high-end phone, is old. So there are going to be some features that are really common today that weren't common back then. So this is the rear camera for the Moto G Stylus. It looks really nice. The image is super crisp. Colors are well balanced. I really like this a lot. This is the ultra wide mode, and a lot of ultra wide cameras, especially the lower to mid-range phones, they do get a little bit blurry, but that's not the case with this phone. It's still really crisp, really high quality. No complaints here. This is the macro camera for the Moto G Stylus. It does look really nice. The focus is a little quirky when you put it at certain angles, but that's to be expected. I would say that it is still usable, so that's great. This is the front-facing camera for the Moto G Stylus. I do think it's good quality. The colors are decently balanced and the image is crisp, so no problems there. This is portrait mode for the Moto G Stylus. It's definitely decent. Everything is well blended. One thing I do like about this portrait mode is you can control the degree of the blur right here on this little slider, and I think that's a really nice feature. The more control you have over different aspects of the photo when you're taking it, the better, so that's a really nice feature to have. This is the normal camera mode for the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. It does look really good. The colors are well balanced. The image is really crisp. I would say the image is a tiny bit more crisp than that of the Moto G Stylus, but it's not really enough to make a big difference. So I would say that they look overall pretty much the same. So this is a close-up image with the telephoto lens. I would compare this to the macro camera of the Moto G Stylus, and I think this is a lot better. Not only do you not have to put your phone right up against something to take the picture, you can just zoom in instead. But it's a lot more crisp and detailed. The details are a lot more vivid and the colors are still great. The quality is still perfect, whereas with the macro camera on the Moto G Stylus compared to this is not quite as good. So for close-up images, I definitely would say the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 does have an edge on that. This is the front-facing camera for the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. It does look decent, but I do think the Moto G Stylus does have a slightly better quality on the front-facing camera. The colors are pretty much the same, but this one isn't as crisp. Now, in general, I think both of these phones do have great cameras. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 might have a tiny bit of an edge as far as the quality of certain images go, but then again, the Moto G Stylus does have a better front-facing camera, and then the advantage the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has on the rear camera is mostly the telephoto lens. I think that's a lot better than a macro camera, but on the other hand, it has no ultra-wide, whereas the Moto G Stylus does. So really, I wouldn't even make a decision between these two phones based on the camera because they're so similar as far as overall quality and features combined. I don't think there's that much of a difference. I think if you were taking pictures for the purpose of content creation, then either of these phones would be fine. They're not going to be quite the level of a brand new Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra or something of that caliber, but they're still going to be really great. And if your photos that you're taking are being used on something like a social media platform where the images are compressed anyway, you're most likely gonna hit the threshold where the images are compressed. So really, you're not going to notice the difference between this and a much higher phone unless you zoom in really far, which nobody's doing. So overall, both cameras are great. I don't really have that many complaints about either of them. I do wish the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 had an ultra-wide camera, but relative to a brand new phone, this is a few years old. They weren't really using ultra-wide cameras on phones back then as much. It is to be expected. Now video-wise, the Moto G Stylus is able to shoot 4K videos in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is able to shoot 2160p at 30 frames per second in the rear camera and 1440p at 30 frames per second in the front camera. So it's basically the same. Again, there's really not that much of a difference between these two phones as far as taking pictures or shooting videos. For it to really be a decent deciding factor, I don't think that either of them have a bad camera, and I think that whether you choose one or the other, both of them are going to be able to give you the same amount of value as far as that goes. Now internally, the Moto G Stylus is getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 678 processor. We ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone a little while ago, and it came back with a single core score of 538 and a multi-core score of 1588. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor. This one came back with a single core score of 363 and a multi-core score of 1582. So for all intents and purposes, these processors are basically going to be the same. The Moto G Stylus might have a little bit of an edge, but really not that much. The only real difference between these two is that the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has 6GB of RAM as opposed to 4GB of RAM with the Moto G Stylus, which really isn't going to make a whole lot of difference. Both of these are going to be completely fine for daily activities. Now, you're probably not going to want to get into super intense stuff like video editing or hardcore gaming, because a lot of the more high-end games these days require a lot of processing power. That wasn't really a thing when the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 was made, and the Moto G Stylus isn't made for stuff that's that high-end. And as far as video editing goes, that does take a decent amount of processing power, and these phones would probably be okay with it. But if there is trouble, then this is most likely why, because the processors, while not being bad at all, are definitely not even close to the highest out there. Now, seeing the Geekbench scores of these phones is one thing, but seeing them in action is another. So we're going to test out how fast these phones are and see which one can perform better. We're going to start by opening Google Chrome. As we can see here, the Moto G Stylus was a tiny bit faster there. We're going to go to a web page real quick. Again, the Moto G Stylus was just a tiny bit faster. We're gonna go to one more page. That time, the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 was just a tiny bit faster. So you can really see that although most of the time the Moto G Stylus is just a hair faster, they're really not that different. So as far as the processor goes, I really don't think the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has any clear advantage over the Moto G Stylus or vice versa. So really, I don't think that that's that much of a concern. The Moto G Stylus has a 4000 milliamp hour battery and the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has a 3300 milliamp hour battery. This is definitely a noticeable difference. The Moto G Stylus has a much bigger battery and will definitely give you a lot more life. Also, having a bigger battery, as the battery degrades, you're not going to notice it as much with the Moto G Stylus because it does have a bigger battery. Now, another thing to think about is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 has been around for a little while, which means the battery is not going to be as fresh. So not only is the battery much smaller than that of the Moto G Stylus, but the Moto G Stylus is a brand new phone and the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is not. So that's going to make this difference even bigger. Another difference between these two phones that's very evident by age is that the Moto G Stylus runs on Android 10 and the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 runs on Android 9 Pie. The Moto G Stylus is a lot newer and it's going to get the newest Android and newer features, whereas the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 is not going to be able to be updated anymore. So you're kind of stuck with Android 9 Pie. One more thing that we're going to check out is the styluses of these two phones. Starting with the Moto G Stylus, it does have a pop-out stylus, which is definitely an improvement from the predecessor that had a pull-out one. I didn't really care for that one, but this one is really nice. It feels a lot more premium. The stylus itself feels really well built. Opening up this little drawing pad thing, we're going to see how it actually reacts. It's definitely not the fastest stylus in the world. As you can see, there's a little bit of lag on here, but it's not too bad. I definitely wouldn't use this stylus for something like actual graphic design. I know a lot of people do want to use a stylus on a mobile device, and I don't think I could recommend that for this. It is just a little bit laggy. It's not really quite sensitive enough for that. But as far as doing something like scrolling through the phone, it's fine. I don't see any issues with that. I can scroll through the app drawer, the home screens, no problem. It feels just like a finger. Now, checking out the stylus for the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, it also does have a pop-out stylus. I think this is definitely an industry standard at this point. One nice thing about this stylus that doesn't happen on the Moto G Stylus is that you can see there's a little crosshair right here. Checking out the note screen, same thing. This stylus is a little bit more sensitive, so that is good. I would say if you are doing some sort of graphic design, something like that, you might be able to do it better with this one. The Moto G Stylus had a little coloring page, as you saw back there, but I can't imagine actually using that with one of these things. It's just not quite sensitive enough. But overall, I would say the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 does have a little bit better of a stylus. The Moto G Stylus is great if you're just trying to use it for pointing or scrolling or something like that, but I couldn't imagine using it for drawing. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, I could kind of see it. Not really enough to make a big difference. If you're really going for drawing or graphic design or coloring or something, I would definitely look at a more high-end device than these, because the stylus for the Note 8, while it's pretty decent, is still not quite where I would expect it to be if I were going to use it for graphic design or something. I think around the time this phone was released, they were still more or less figuring it out, so there's also that. Now, in conclusion, which one of these devices is actually better? Now, normally older flagship phones do have a clear advantage over the newer, more mid-range phones, but in this case, I do still think that in pretty much every way, the Moto G Stylus is better. This phone has a much larger display, a more modern look, and a lot of features that really weren't that common when the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 was released. It has a better fingerprint scanner. The camera is about the same quality, but it has other features like the ultra-wide camera, it has a newer version of Android, and it has a much bigger battery than the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 as well. In addition to this, the main difference between an older flagship phone and a newer phone like the Moto G Stylus that's not quite as high end is usually the processing power. And in the case of these two phones, there's not really that much of a difference at all. And to take that a step further, I do believe the Moto G Stylus is actually a tiny bit faster than the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. So there's really not that much of an advantage in getting an older Samsung Galaxy Note 8 versus the Moto G Stylus. Because with the Moto G Stylus, you're getting a fresh battery, a much newer phone, a lot more features, and a newer version of Android. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, it is a little bit used. It has a smaller battery to begin with, and that battery is going to be a bit degraded, and the processing power isn't even faster. But overall, even with the differences between the two as far as the stylus goes, I really wouldn't say it's a big deciding factor, just because neither of them are really good enough to the point where I would personally be comfortable using them in an actual professional setting. They're more or less just a fun little tool to have if you really want to use it. So really, unless the deal that you get is a lot better, I would say pretty much no matter what your situation is, the Moto G Stylus is going to be the better choice. Now, if you do want some more information about the Samsung Galaxy Note 8, we do have a link in the description that'll take you right to this phone on Samsung's website, where a lot of the time they have some great trade-in deals that you might not be able to find anywhere else that might help you make your decision better. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, definitely leave a thumbs up and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.